We just got the dire struggle of all the heroes happening simultaneously. Have Rex get caught, give a speech about how heroes are stupid and never give up. Cut to all the heroes, Darkwing, Donald, all start to lock in to keep on fighting, with all their sacrifices happening all at once, and Rex's big explosion being for the most part. But on the whole, this has been the episode of Invincible that I've been the most critical of, which brings us to my biggest issue with this episode and the season as a whole. You see.
So, Invincible is on its penultimate episode last week, so I thought I'll just review one of the most popular videos going around based on the most recent battle that took place, this being the Invincible War.
This episode made me want to slap Mark, which is insane, cause I'm talking about the good one. The Invincible War is finally here, and it is proving Cecil right and offering one of the saddest moments in the series, the animation. I mean, not really, as I've just accepted how the show will never give its crew enough time to cook. We must come to Invincible for the violence and the writing, which is where I have actual critiques of this episode, as yeah, Daddy Cecil got proven right, Mark left the rest of the world to die, but the roughest thing to happen this episode is that it made the rest of the season weaker in hindsight for me, as we have had a lot of opportunities to build up and pay off Mark's story, only for a red idiot to completely steal the show. Let me explain. To get my overall opinion out of the way first, I think this episode is solid, but I have serious notes on how it handled certain things and how it makes me look at the rest of the season in a harsher light. Though yeah, Cecil was proven 100% correct by the end of this thing. Mark may hate Cecil, but those countermeasures came in clutch. His faith in Darkwing took out a Mark. You may think he's an unethical control freak, and you'd be right, but his desire for countermeasures against Mark and Viltrumites have just been proven exactly what the world needed in this particular case and in the very foreseeable future. So despite Mark not wanting to admit it, Cecil was proven right, and that's something Mark is going to have to grapple with one of these days. Also, speaking of people who were right, me. Rex continues to be an MVP. Crazy how he went from just an asshat early on to actually learning to care about others, undergoing all this growth, and oh shit, it's gonna be Rex, isn't it? Rex is the one who's gonna die.
Best boy with the biggest death flags.
I've never been more heartbroken to have called something. Rex again has been an MVP this season. His growth from a douche to a lovable goof has been one of the best examples of character growth in the series. His relationship with Ray managed to be just so endearing, it annoys the shit out of me how even Mark don't have a quarter of this chemistry, despite having so much more screen time. I will do a video on why I find them boring, but I think the funniest realization I can just give right now is that while watching this episode, I noticed how even when
I have to disagree with that take. Mark and Eve's relationship does make perfect sense, especially because in common fiction, especially comic book stories, it's very easy for conflicts to be arisen just based on simple miscommunication, where characters don't be honest with themselves, which leaves either the twofold situation, where either the situation is just left in limbo and there's no progression, or there's unnecessary conflict where prevents them coming together. Here in the season, they've been mature about the situation and they've had open communication in order to support each other in other interests, while also individually growing and developing themselves as their own character. So I do have to disagree with that point, but let's continue.
Eve is unconscious, the only thing Mark has to talk to her about is still just his own problems. Meanwhile, Rex and Ray have a genuine back and forth that is truly adorable, even as Rex basically throws up death flags like it's an Olympic sport. He talks about how much he's changed and grown, how good life is right now, and like, there has never been a more obvious I'm about to die speech than this. Rex's death was metal as hell, detonating his own skeleton to just kill one of the Marks, and while it hurts, this is what the season has been prepping us for. I think the way they structured the scene could have been tweaked a little bit, and I don't love the immediate song afterwards, but I think my biggest wish is that we just got a little bit more time to marinate in Rex's sacrifice. We go so quickly to, oh my god, Rex died, and all these other people who we don't care about, they are also gone. I was like, no, go back. Ray needs to like sit there and maybe find a piece of him somewhere. The he's dead line is solid, just stick that knife into Mark a little bit deeper as it deserves to be. I'm just thinking like, damn, they could be milking the death of one of their most beloved characters a little bit more. And I'm pretty sure we're gonna do that as we have a whole other episode they can have a funeral, and I'm going to be broken whenever Ray just, whatever she does. The last thing it would've been nice if we gotten one more scene of him being a hero between leaving Ray and his death, just to make it so we don't go from 100 death flags to his immediate death. But overall, I think it works. Unlike Ray not immediately joining the fight once she turned on the news and realized Rex was up against an Invincible. This is on day 2. I think think she would have been with the team instead of just driving up right now. But that aside, I do like that this episode lives up to the threat of multiple evil marks invading. The devastation is catastrophic, lots of dead heroes, and hey, we may have even seen some of them before. Which, given how big this cast is, yeah, that fits. Steven Yeun did honestly a fantastic job of getting each of these marks their own unique voice. They could have easily just had him speak the same for every single one, but no, each one is unique, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah,
we don't get a chance to like really dig into any of their characters. I do appreciate just these little moments to say like, okay, some of these marks, they are crazy. But then others, we get these moments of sympathy that like, okay, no, there's still a bit of Mark in there. It's just been warped to hell and back. I think my favorite out of all these was Omnimark. He just had the single best line in the episode that I can't play because Amazon copyright has been insane lately. Like, they're claiming my entire video based on one frame. Like, seriously, what the hell is this? But yeah, Omnimark, really liked him, and hope we get to see more of him and the rest of these marks at some point later on. And I kind of wish we could dig in more into like their backstories and like what made them the way that they are, as some of them just seem almost not evil. I mean, they're still pretty fucked up, as they made deals with Angstrom of all people, but that is something for another time. I also like though how Armark is the strongest. All these other guys, they probably never had to train to do anything. They can 1v1 pretty much anyone everywhere, so there's very little incentive outside like the other Viltrumite ones to train to get stronger, while Armark has just been buckling down to be ready for like whatever fight comes next. These other marks had just way too easy, so they never had to try. Though, speaking of easy, I'm still a little bit iffy on how strong these marks and Armark is supposed to be. A single Viltrumite can easily wipe out a planet. So I was actually surprised that the normal heroes were just winning. They could beat a Mark, they could beat a Viltrumite, and after all the worry and dread from how much they have been built up, that is honestly surprising to me. I mean,
I do agree. Like, the actual showcase of how strong they are in relation to the existing people we know could have been done a little bit better. Like, at the end of the day, these guys are all still like Viltrumites. Like, season 1 Mark, is he really losing to most of the people who they lost to this season? I don't know. But then again, it's really hard to really understand strength and growth with Mark as a character, because 90% of the time everyone says he's holding back, but at the same time he's getting beat up to a pulp every fight. It's really all over the place, the consistency of Mark's strength. But that is something Invincible could do a little bit better.
The Guardians. These guys are supposed to be the strongest heroes on the planet, the greatest hero team that Cecil can make, and they basically lose. These guys couldn't take down one of them. Yes, this is the broke version of the already broke Guardians, but this was a total party kill and would have been a complete failure if not for Darkwing taking one for the team. Yet when we check to other places, yeah, some of these other marks lose without like the help of Cecil and the rest. Oliver I buy, Cecil's countermeasures check out, Powerplex built himself around killing Mark, but I have questions about these other randos and why the hell they aren't on the Guardians.
Apparently,
I don't care how much they want. Pay them, we need to get Shapesmith and Duplicate just on the bench, as they have not been clutch this entire series. Hell, Black Samson's greatest achievement is just being the team dad and not dying. If Immortal and Darkwing had some actual backup, they might have been able to take down at least one of these guys. Also, I bring this up because knowing how strong Earth's heroes are and just how they can take on one Mark, having that answer goes a long way to justifying, or at least make me slightly less infuriated at Mark.
Pattern up, bro.
I was so pissed off at Mark when he was like trying to justify staying on the bench. Like, Anakin, shut up. There's literally tens of thousands of people dying every minute. Choosing to stay on the off chance one of those marks attacks the Pentagon, valid. I understand why he would make that choice, but that doesn't make it any less just incredibly irresponsible.
Terrible.
When Cecil roasted him for being childish, this should be the #1 example going forward. I know Eve means so much to him, but I don't want to hear a word out of his mouth about, oh, I should have killed Angstrom, when no. The man should be dead, but it's this choice to stay by Eve's side even as his copies commit mass murder.
Shameful.
This is what I feel like we should be grilling him for. As, yeah, how does Mark bounce back from this? How will the story make him suffer because of it? I'm curious to see how this will play out. I don't think the public will ever forgive him for this. I mean, he'd have to save the world at least a couple times, which, oh yeah, Conquest. That is how you get out of it. But to talk about the things I'm slightly more middling on, as at least Mark not joining the fight makes sense. Other stuff I'm like more iffy on, like Angstrom. Now, personally, I have never loved Angstrom. I think him holding Debbie hostage is one of the most intense scenes in Invincible. He serves as an interesting manifestation of the unseen victims of superheroics. And this just occurred to me, he is a man who wanted to do good, to save the world, only for his desire to be the good guy, resulting in just thousands of deaths. But all that aside, I just don't think he has the narrative presence needed to make him the main antagonist of the season. He is barely in season 2. The foreshadowing is just, ooh, look, he's up to something, then we never get enough of him to really build dread for whatever he ends up doing, which is the same issue that I have with this season. My honest take is that this season did a better job of setting up Cecil as the main antagonist than Angstrom or Conquest. The guy's presence in this season boils down to like, oh, a tease, and bringing the actual threats. I chuckle when he claimed that he likes to make an entrance, as this man has so little stage presence. He has no, and I hate to say it, aura. Like, Sterling K. Brown is giving.
It's very true. It's all well good having a bit bad. And it's just as part of writing critique. Not like I'm a writer, but I'll still get my honest points. Like, part of what makes a good and compelling story is that they should have external forces to the character, and also that same character have internal threats about themselves. For Mark, this internal threat is his ideology of being a good hero, and what it means to be a good hero, and the philosophy of doing the right thing. That's like his internal struggles. But then you need to have a compelling external struggle which challenges that belief fundamentally. That's why Cecil is so much better here as a character, because he acts as external force, what forces his own which coincides with his internal conflict of doing the right thing, doing the morally doing the morally questionable thing for the best outcome. The whole idealist approach versus more like of a utilitarianism approach. Cecil works much better here, but at Angstrom, he's just like, oh, I don't like heroes, I don't like Mark, so I will be the antagonist. It works, but it's hollow. There needs to be a lot more depth to what creates this contrast and deposition of ideas and philosophies. But that's just my opinion.
A good performance. I don't think he is the problem whatsoever. It is just how the show uses him. Angstrom just comes off as so bland to me. And the most interesting thing he does this episode is rip off Megamind. I'm going to talk about this more in a bit, but I think Invincible has developed a bit of a problem with its love of shock value, of villains popping at the worst possible time unannounced, which is cool in some cases, but however, I think it comes at the cost of actually having them in the story to build up and focus the plot. I think Angstrom's and the defeat of the other Invincibles is just anticlimactic. The Invincibles that survive just get double-crossed, and Angstrom's fight didn't pop off despite the bones of a great action scene clearly being here. These villains came out of nowhere, and by the end of the episode, they've all been dealt with for the time being. I figured these events will play a huge role later in the story. That doesn't shake the sense that while good, I like this episode, I think the concept and the execution, just so many missed opportunities, and I wish we could have done more with it. If there was ever an episode of Invincible that could have been stretched out to be a full hour, this was it. Give us extra time to indulge in the chaos rather than just getting what feels like cliff notes. Those cliff notes work. I think it does tell a compelling story, for the most part, but on the whole, this has been the episode of Invincible that I've been the most critical of, which brings us to my biggest issue with this episode and the season as a whole. You see, personally, 3 seasons in, I think Invincible peaked in its first. Been rewatching recently, and yeah, it did look better in places, even though it was still clearly janky as fuck. Season 1, though, is just the best when it comes to the actual narrative, as this season has an actual through line, aka Omni-Man. While most of Invincible's first season could be considered episodic, each episode is its own story, it's doing its own thing, but the thing that ties all these events together is that slow build to the Omni-Man reveal, for Mark, Debbie, and the world to find out who Omni-Man is, and for us to find out why he did it. Every episode inched us closer, new information was revealed, Nolan's mask kept slipping, and we're bracing for the shit show that will happen once that bomb drops. This was the central hook for the season. Hell, it was the hook for the series. Invincible may be character driven, and it is good at it. The series' inability to give each season a genuine overarching plot, mystery, or just anything hurts it. It leaves us to just follow the lives of the characters, and it's good, but there's nothing to lock in all these storylines and create a sense that we are building to a big finish and climax like we did in season 1. Instead, things just just happened to the characters with us having to shrug and accept like, okay, this is what we're doing now. It's still good, but I think it's missing that structure to really make it great. This is my main issue with season 2 besides the random ass gap. I enjoyed it as a falling action slash setup season, but the main conflicts here pop up out of nowhere only for the show to just go back to business as usual. Nolan's return just happens. Anissa just happens. Angstrom, despite getting built up in what was near exclusively MCU mid-credit scenes, just kinda happens. The shock factor for all these events is effective, but I think that isn't worth leaving the rest of the season without just that thing to really guide and like tie all these events together. This creates a situation where the individual episodes are good.
It's very true. It almost tries to like almost rely on like the boys formula, whereas the boys the shock value, gore, like almost kind of fourth dimensional kind of jokes, breaking that wall, breaking the fourth wall kind of jokes. And it's also quite episodic with every episode feeling quite contained in that way. But it misses the step with like the boys where there is still that progression, there's still that overarching story, the anticipation of threats, which Invincible does miss. And that's why I feel it really is really lacking. So it's only like 50% of the boys' story, but it is what it is. Still enjoyable, but in terms of writing, there's so much more that could be done with it.
I don't think they build to a greater whole as well as they could, with season 3 being the fucking worst at this. When Mark had this line about spending all his time torturing himself over how he shouldn't have killed Angstrom only to realize he probably should have, that pissed me off, as this has been the angst season of Mark. Every episode has dragged this man into the mud of some new moral quandary, only for the hero reeling from his seemingly killing of Angstrom to double down on being just a standard good guy, not wanting to compromise his morals even as the world just kept showing him how things are complicated and that being good doesn't always lead to the best results. Yes, Cecil has entered the chat, yet despite the season low-key trying to bully Mark into being an anti-hero, it doesn't fucking go anywhere. No, straight up, after episode 2 of this season, you could play any of the events in the next 4 episodes that happen to Mark in any order, and it wouldn't make a difference to Mark's storyline, as in this season, it's just a broken record. I enjoy it, but it is repetitive. There's next to no carryover or progression for his character. He doesn't learn a lesson in one episode that gets carried over to the next, like besides getting guilt-tripped by Powerplex. Making the 2 instances in this episode where they're trying to bring this arc home, even as like clearly they're gonna finish up fully in the next, like what they did annoyed me. As yeah, the line is a massive no shit from me. Story has been ranting at him this entire time. While each episode present a different moral quandary, the essential question remained the same. Does Mark want to be a good guy, or does he want to be the guy who saves the world? With Mark never arriving at any real answer till this, with the weak payoff making all the prior events feel just all the more repetitive to me. They are interesting on their own, but they don't build to make this moment more impactful, and it just highlights to me what was probably the more standalone pacing of the original comic, where each issue was doing its own thing even as it built up to just the grander narrative, whereas season 1 felt like it had been refined to fit an 8-episode season of TV. Also, the other thing that makes this episode just weaken the rest of the season is just how strange the conclusion to Mark's fight with Angstrom is, as I don't know why Oliver is here. This season has been building towards Mark choosing to kill. He's gotten some freebies from people who technically could have survived being killed, so him finally being faced with a threat he has to put down to protect those he cares about, that is what this season has been building to. Even if he still end up failing to kill Angstrom, I think Mark truly forsaking his aversion to killing would work to wrap up this part of his story. But the way this moment is set up is weird to me, as Mark was going to kill Angstrom. He had that dude by the throat. It felt like he was 1 cent away from scrambled eggs, only for Oliver to show up and state the obvious. Oh, he killed people, he should die so he can never do it again. Like what are you waiting for? And the answer is for you to shut up. Everything that happened in this episode, everything that's happened in this season has made the need for Oliver to show up and scream the main idea just...
I don't think about that. It's clearly shown here that Mark was still hesitating. So I feel like it's very... I don't mind Oliver being there, because many times that when they're accidentally killing somebody and with full bloodlust and intent killing somebody has 2 different levels of emotional weight to a person's psyche. So in that moment, Mark clearly, for me in my interpretation, hesitates. So obviously Oliver's there to just kind of be the final push over the edge to confirm that he's doing the right thing. So I think it's fair enough to see, in my personal opinion. Is it frustrating that he needed that extra push? Yes. Are we tired of people like Batman who have a no-kill policy, kill policy, even like Daredevil. Yes, we are tired of it. Sometimes these villains, where it's Angstrom, who can clearly just come back with a bigger army 2 times the size. What happens next time if he brings multiple, if he brings like 20 variants of Omni-Man, for example? Then what are you doing? These kind of characters like Joker, Batman, these kind of characters have to be killed. There's just no stopping them. Even like Daredevil, like Kingpin. Like, he's too, his corruption runs too deep in the city where he'll always just break, these characters will always just break out. They'll always just come back again with more equipped into dealing with you. You have to just get rid of him at points. But that's more of a criticism on the whole no killing idea rather than Mark himself. But for me personally, I don't mind Oliver here.
Totally unnecessary. But what's worse, the way the scene was going made it feel like Mark was already about to kill Angstrom. If Mark was debating it more, yeah, Oliver being here to push Mark would make more narrative sense. He does ask the question like, why would you do this? But from what the scene is giving me, it feels like we could have had Angstrom make one snarky comment, then Mark would have snapped his neck. Like, this was so weird to me that I did something out of character for myself. I read the comic. Yeah, I actually looked up and read the Invincible War issue, and yeah, shocker, it makes way more sense there. As in the comics, Mark is monologuing at Angstrom. He's talking a big game only for Oliver to cut in and say, yeah, just kill him already, as his bro is wasting time. Oliver is the one who tells Mark to his face that this all could have been prevented if he had really just killed Angstrom, with this being enough to make Mark find a side to just end it. In the show, Invincible says 2 sentences and is already on the cusp of killing him. Mark doesn't debate like, oh my god, I can't do this in front of Oliver. Instead, he just goes through with what he was already gonna do, making Oliver's inclusion feel like it's really just here to give Angstrom time to come up with an escape plan, leaving this whole moment to feel not just unsatisfying, but just confusing. And after this, I kinda don't care if he kills Conquest. That won't fix how strange this scene is and how little the show seems to trust his audience to get what's going on. I know it might seem like I'm jumping the gun as we have 1 episode left to this season, but my gut and the comments are telling me Conquest versus Invincible is gonna...
I can't lie, to be fair, because I haven't read the comic either. That's more of an issue with the adaptation rather than Oliver being there to begin with, because they need Oliver to be there as part of the scene, but they also need to cut dialogue of Mark just to ensure that the episode meets its like suspected runtime. And it's just pretty normal, especially if if any of you watch light novels. When you ever have it's just natural that monologues have to be cut because they can really isolate the scene, and it makes it a little bit, and it just really isolates the theme, so which doesn't translate as well when you adapt into like live media. So, like I said, I personally don't have a problem with the scene, but that's just me. What are your guys' thoughts?
Primarily spectacle. In fact, I'm going to make a $5 guess on exactly what's gonna happen. It's gonna be Mark getting his ass kicked till Oliver or Debbie, someone important, gets maimed, forcing Mark to lock in and finally start going for the kill. He'll get comfortable with just getting his hands dirty if it means protecting others, roll credits. And at that point, it's like, okay, cool. Finally pay that off. But it feels like it's too late and Mark's arc has just been too repetitive, which I think ties into a criticism I agree with from Cosmonaut Marcus, who said in season 2, Mark is outshined by the rest of the supporting cast. His arc is good, but it's stretched out over the course of the entire season, and I think that it still holds very much true for this one. It feels like Mark's arc is stuck on a treadmill with interesting ideas being present, but explored better through other characters like Powerplex. The should we kill villains and their humanization is best explored through Oliver and the various baddies. But while we're getting all that good stuff, Mark's personal opinion and way of operating remains the same until he gets bummed out by Powerplex and then he hides in a hospital room while people are dying. I like Mark and the ideas being played with. However, for a character-driven season, these events don't change the main character as much as I think they should, which is a shame because I feel like we need that so that we can keep having these episodic adventures with this through line going through all of it. Also, to glaze the comics just a little bit more, I personally think the comic did something that would have been a huge benefit to the show. And by that, I mean really intercutting all the scenes together. It would have been a nightmare to plan out and it's way easier to do in the comics, but I can't help but think that a few scenes dragged on just a bit too long, the Guardian fight being the biggest offender. For a threat that is supposed to feel this overwhelming, having that sense there are too many fires to put out would have been enhanced by constantly intercutting to multiple different scenes. We do this a little bit with the montage montages, but I don't think it goes far enough, with us usually sticking to one fight till it's finished. If we were constantly cutting between different moments, then the sense of chaos would give us no room to breathe, which would then
That
make
would
the
have been
quiet scenes
good.
like Mark at Eve's side feel just out of place and highlight how he just isn't doing jack shit. I understand the idea to give moments like Rex's sacrifice
that
more
video.
time to like be there, but again, I think we need one more extra scene of Rex being a hero to really make this death sink in, plus removing the music. So I think it would have been great if we just got the dire struggle of all the heroes happening simultaneously. Have Rex get caught, give a speech about how heroes are stupid and never give up, cut to all the heroes, Darkwing, Donald, all start to lock in to keep on fighting, with all their sacrifices happening all at once, and Rex's big explosion being the finish. Now, I'm slightly biased as I knew the Invincible War was coming, spoilers were everywhere. I was expecting it, and I thought it would be a bit more chaotic. We were this close to having that level of energy, but instead we settled for serviceable, which is how I would describe a lot of the production for this show. Though, again, I know the crew wasn't given time to cook, and I just assumed that the animatics for a lot of these moments popped the fuck off, then had to just get crunched down due to the lack of time. Animation takes a long time, and the fact that Robert Kirkman said like, oh yeah, the goal for Invincible is to put out a new season every February just sounds insane to me. Though it fully explains why this show feels so bare bones at times. Personally, I'm always down to wait a little bit longer to give the animators more time to work. Like,
Agreed.
if this is what the show looks like after only a year and some change, imagine what it would look like if we had like a year and a half, or two. Now, all my whinging aside, again, I did enjoy this episode.
I
It has
agree.
the most promise, yet it also has
Just
some of the most
2 year
glaring
releases,
issues of
that's
any
fine.
Invincible episode I've ever seen. Like, outside of what was clearly them having no money. I like shock and awe as much as the next guy, but when I finished this episode, it made me look at the rest of the season in a different light, and it wasn't for the better. Maybe the final episode will flip me to thinking that this whole thing is a masterpiece, but from how much I've heard this is going to be the big fight, the biggest fight, seeing what they did to Angstrom versus Mark, okay, I'll believe it when I see it.
I really love that last point what he made, just in terms of how they could have easily portrayed the scenes better, like the whole flashbacks, like just continually cutting between scenes, could have been brilliant in terms of just depicting the chaos and how mad the actual situation is, which would add further showing of how out of place Mark's actions is in the contrast of true heroes. And especially with the overview of Mark's character this season, it's very, very similar and reminds me of OG like Ben 10. It's like, it's these kind of situations where a character has to almost relearn the same lessons over and over again, which makes it very, very repetitive and boring. Not boring, but just jarring at that point. Well, something like Ben 10 we can forgive, because firstly, especially in the OG series, he's like 10 years old, so you got that level of view. And even then, there's like over 40, there's like 50 episodes, so naturally there's only so many lessons to be learned before you have to kind of like have the character backtrack and learn the same lessons. Here in this kind of narrative, it just doesn't work because if there's 8 episodes, you can focus on you can focus on 1-2 lessons per season, for example, and develop them like that. This season, he could have just focused on the idea. If he just solely focused on the idea of being a better hero or what it means to be a hero, and then let every episode build up to it and showing him what it means to be a hero, and then it can show him at the end of this episode 7 of him how he's hasn't truly learned, and that's the consequences of all the death that happened in episode 7, as like as nearly like a message just before the final, and then in the final episode he can like overcome that lesson, and that's a culmination of everything he's learnt. But here it's the case that he doesn't really learn the lesson, he just feels the same every episode. We say he feels guilty, but his actions don't show it. We say he's trying to be he tries to act like he's a hero, but he doesn't make any changes any of his actions or ideologies or way he considers nuances of being a hero, and he doesn't properly explore them, nor does it grow him as a character. We've been told he's getting stronger, but every episode is just a rinse and repeat, get beaten up, like hide it for victory at the end. And now we're gonna expect him just to lock in all of a sudden, like, bro, show us this. But that's just the story of Invincible at the end of the day. Like I said, I've still enjoyed it, but Invincible, it's one of these things where it just needs more time. As you guys know, I do like my anime, and as anime watchers, we're kind of conditioned to just wait quite a long time for a second season. My favorite anime this season of ReZero has been airing. Do you know the last time it's on its third season? The last season we got was in 2020. 5 years since the last season. That's how long we have, and the animation is much better than this. Am I saying give me 5 year periods? No, but 2 years I think is more than enough. Especially when you're already like forecasting that you're gonna have another season. Once one finishes, you start the first one, the next season for the year, and then 6 months you have another 6 months there, and another 6 months you have the marketing kind of thing. 2 years. But I I agree with the content creator part of him. Other parts I disagree. But that's all part of watching TV and different shows. We all we all have our different interpretations, views and interpretations of what each scene means, where it could have gone better. But to each their own. I'd like to know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you agree with me? Disagree with me? Agree with the content creator? We're going to disagree. And where you think there could be any improvements. And most importantly, what do you think of Mark's character? But with that, thank you for watching. As always, like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, ciao.